Have you ever felt like you're doing everything right? The fasting, the keto meals, the discipline, and yet your progress has stalled? The scale won't budge, your energy crashes, and somehow what once felt effortless now feels like a battle. You're not alone. Thousands of people are discovering that the very tools meant to unlock metabolic health, fasting and keto, are starting to fail them. Frustration has become a common theme among people following keto and fasting protocols. In the beginning, the results often seem miraculous. Weight drops quickly, energy soars, and the mental clarity is undeniable. But then something changes. Progress stalls, fatigue creeps back in, and cravings that once disappeared begin to resurface. Many begin to question what went wrong. The promise of metabolic transformation suddenly feels like an illusion, leaving people trapped between dedication and disappointment. This frustration isn't just physical, it's emotional. People feel betrayed by their own bodies, or worse, they blame themselves for failing a system they once believed in. The truth, however, is that this isn't about failure, it's about adaptation. The body is not static, it is dynamic, responsive, and profoundly intelligent. When you start a new eating pattern, such as keto or intermittent fasting, your metabolism experiences a significant shift. In the early stages, the body is forced to become more efficient at burning fat for fuel, which leads to rapid changes in body composition and energy balance. But as time goes on, this same adaptation becomes the reason progress slows down. What once served as a metabolic advantage gradually plateaus because the body has learned to operate efficiently within the new constraints. It's like taking a shortcut that works beautifully the first few times, only for your body to build a permanent road there. It's no longer a challenge, and therefore no longer a stimulus for change. This is where many people start to feel stuck. They extend their fasting windows, cut calories further, or remove even more carbs, believing that more restriction will reignite results. Yet, the opposite often happens. The body perceives prolonged deprivation as a threat, and in response, it conserves energy. Hormones like leptin and thyroid hormones begin to downregulate, metabolism slows, and cortisol rises. These physiological shifts make fat loss increasingly difficult, and at the same time, energy levels and mood start to decline. The sense of vitality that once defined the early stages of keto or fasting begins to fade away. This experience is not unique. It's a predictable biological response. When we push one dietary lever for too long, we lose the metabolic flexibility that allows the body to seamlessly switch between energy sources. What people interpret as keto or fasting not working is really the body's remarkable way of protecting itself from perceived scarcity. The frustration that follows is often amplified by misinformation and unrealistic expectations. Diet culture teaches us that success should be linear, that we should always be losing, shrinking, improving, but biology doesn't work that way. The human metabolism thrives on balance, variation, and signals of safety. Recognizing this cycle of frustration and adaptation is the first step toward breaking it. Instead of viewing stalled progress as a failure, it should be understood as feedback. The body is asking for recalibration, for nourishment, and for a more intelligent approach to energy regulation. Keto and fasting are powerful tools, but like any tool, their effectiveness depends on timing, context, and how they're used in harmony with the body's own rhythms. Metabolic flexibility is one of the most crucial yet misunderstood aspects of health and weight management. It's the body's ability to switch seamlessly between different energy sources, primarily carbohydrates and fats, depending on what's available. When the body is metabolically flexible, it can efficiently burn glucose after a meal and effortlessly shift to burning fat during fasting or low-carb periods. This adaptability is what keeps energy levels stable, mental focus sharp, and fat metabolism efficient. The problem is that many modern diets, including long-term keto and extended fasting, unintentionally erode this flexibility. By staying in one metabolic state for too long, the body forgets how to move between fuel systems with ease, creating rigidity instead of resilience. When people first adopt fasting or a ketogenic lifestyle, their metabolic flexibility often improves temporarily. The body learns to access fat stores, produce ketones, and rely less on frequent meals or glucose spikes. But if these states are maintained without variation for months or years, the system begins to lose its responsiveness. It's like training only one muscle group over and over again. The others weaken. Without the occasional presence of carbohydrates or variation in feeding patterns, enzymes responsible for glucose metabolism start to downregulate. The body becomes so accustomed to burning fat that it struggles to handle glucose efficiently when reintroduced. This loss of flexibility can manifest as sluggishness after eating carbs, sudden energy crashes, or even weight gain despite a clean diet. Restrictive methods, while effective initially, can push the body toward a state of metabolic rigidity. The longer someone restricts calories, fasts excessively, or eliminates food groups, the stronger the adaptive response becomes. The body begins to prioritize conservation over performance. Hormones like insulin, leptin, and thyroid hormone adjust downward, sending a message to slow energy expenditure and preserve fuel. This is an evolutionary mechanism meant to protect against starvation. But in the modern context, it can make sustained fat loss and vitality feel impossible. People start to feel trapped in a metabolic dead zone, unable to eat more without gaining weight, yet unable to eat less without losing energy. The irony is that true metabolic health doesn't come from constant deprivation or adherence to one rigid system. It comes from the body's ability to adapt and respond fluidly. A metabolically flexible person can fast when needed, eat when hungry, and process both carbs and fats without stress. Their mitochondria, the energy factories of the cells, remain efficient, resilient, and capable of producing energy across a wide range of inputs. When metabolic flexibility is lost, the opposite happens. Energy feels inconsistent, fat loss slows, workouts feel harder, and the body's recovery weakens. Understanding this concept reframes how we view diet and fasting. The goal isn't to stay perpetually in ketosis or to fast longer than everyone else. It's to train the metabolism to handle variety without panic. Restriction has its place, but restoration is equally essential. The healthiest metabolism isn't one that's locked in fat-burning mode all the time. It's one that knows how to switch gears effortlessly, maintaining balance and energy no matter what fuel is on the table. The human body is a master of adaptation. It constantly reads and responds to the environment, adjusting its internal systems to maintain balance and preserve energy. When someone begins a low-carb or fasting regimen, the shift in fuel availability triggers a cascade of metabolic changes. At first, this adaptation feels incredible. Fat stores are mobilized, insulin sensitivity improves, and energy levels soar. The body becomes efficient at using fat and ketones as primary energy sources. But as time passes, that same adaptive mechanism can work against progress. The body, in its intelligence, begins to defend itself from what it perceives as a prolonged period of scarcity. What was once a metabolic advantage gradually turns into a state of conservation. During the early stages of keto or fasting, the drop in insulin and glucose triggers the body to burn stored fat for fuel. This transition leads to rapid weight loss, improved focus, and often a sense of mental clarity that feels empowering. However, if the same conditions persist for too long, the body begins to interpret them differently. Evolutionarily, extended periods of low food availability signaled famine, not health. In response, the metabolism slows down to protect energy reserves. Hormonal changes begin to surface. Thyroid hormones like T3% decrease, lowering the body's metabolic rate. Leptin levels drop, making hunger signals more intense, and cortisol, the stress hormone, rises, promoting fat storage, particularly around the abdomen. These changes are not signs of failure, but of survival. The body's primary goal is to maintain homeostasis. When it senses a consistent lack of carbohydrates or calories, it prioritizes essential processes, keeping the brain and vital organs running while downregulating functions that aren't immediately necessary, like muscle growth or reproductive health. This adaptation explains why, over time, many people experience plateaus despite maintaining strict adherence to fasting windows or keto macros. They might even start to regain weight despite eating less, as the body becomes more efficient at storing fat and less efficient at burning it. This adaptive process also impacts energy levels and mood. As the metabolism slows, people often report feeling fatigued, irritable, or mentally foggy. Sleep quality declines and recovery from exercise becomes more difficult. These are the body's subtle messages that something is out of balance. What started as a strategy for optimization has crossed into a state of metabolic rigidity. The body is no longer thriving, it's enduring. This is where frustration tends to peak, leading individuals to push harder, extend fasts longer, or reduce carbs even further, unknowingly reinforcing the body's stress response. The truth is, the body's adaptation to fasting or low-carb states is both its greatest strength and its greatest limitation. It ensures survival, but it also demands variation. Without reintroducing phases of abundance, adequate calories, balanced macros, and sufficient protein, the metabolism remains suppressed. This cycle of adaptation and slowdown is not an error in the system, it's the system working exactly as designed. To achieve sustainable results, the goal isn't to fight this adaptation but to understand it, to work with it, and to restore balance before the body begins to protect itself from the very strategies meant to help it thrive. Protein plays a far more dynamic role in metabolism than most people realize. While it's often viewed simply as a macronutrient for building muscle, protein is actually a metabolic signal, a message to the body about growth, recovery, and safety. In the context of keto and fasting, where caloric intake is often restricted and energy balance is tightly controlled, protein becomes the difference between a metabolism that adapts and one that thrives. It is the macronutrient that influences hormones, supports lean tissue, stabilizes blood sugar, and determines how efficiently the body burns fat. When people hit a plateau during fasting or low-carb dieting, it's often not because their methods are wrong, but because their protein strategy is incomplete. During periods of fasting or carbohydrate restriction, the body looks for alternative sources of glucose to maintain basic functions like brain activity and red blood cell production. In the absence of sufficient dietary protein, it begins to break down muscle tissue to extract amino acids, which are then converted into glucose through a process called gluconeogenesis. Over time, this loss of muscle mass reduces the body's overall energy expenditure. Since muscle is metabolically active tissue, less of it means fewer calories burned at rest. This is why people can find themselves eating less but still struggling to lose fat. Their metabolism has slowed because they've lost lean tissue along the way. Adequate protein intake protects against this by preserving muscle, keeping the metabolic rate elevated, and signaling the body that it's safe to continue burning fat. Protein also exerts a powerful influence on key hormones that regulate hunger and energy balance. It increases levels of peptide YY and GLP-1, which promote satiety, and lowers ghrelin, the hormone responsible for stimulating appetite. Unlike fat or carbohydrates, protein requires more energy to digest and metabolize, a phenomenon known as the thermic effect of food. This means that simply eating sufficient protein can increase calorie burn throughout the day, further supporting fat loss. But beyond these mechanical effects, protein sends a deeper biological message that the body is nourished, not deprived. This signal helps reduce the stress response associated with prolonged fasting or caloric restriction, lowering cortisol and promoting a more stable hormonal environment. In addition, protein intake supports mitochondrial health, the tiny powerhouses inside cells that determine how efficiently energy is produced. Certain amino acids, particularly leucine, act as triggers for muscle protein synthesis, stimulating growth and repair at the cellular level. This is crucial not only for maintaining muscle mass, but also for enhancing insulin sensitivity and metabolic flexibility. When muscle tissue is healthy and responsive, the body can shuttle nutrients more effectively, preventing the blood sugar spikes and crashes that often accompany metabolic stagnation. For those practicing fasting or keto, the strategic use of protein can mean the difference between stagnation and progress. It's not just about eating more protein, but about using it with intention, timing it to support recovery, muscle retention, and hormonal balance. When protein intake is optimized, the body shifts from survival mode to growth mode, reigniting energy, metabolism, and fat-burning capacity. The concept of a protein trick might sound like a gimmick, but in reality, it's about understanding how to use protein strategically to reignite a stalled metabolism and restore hormonal balance. After long periods of keto or fasting, the body's adaptive mechanisms tend to suppress energy output and slow fat loss as it begins conserving resources. The first protein trick is centered on breaking this metabolic stagnation by reintroducing targeted protein doses at key times to send a powerful signal to the body that it's no longer in scarcity, that it can safely build, burn, and repair again. This is not about eating more indiscriminately, but about using protein as a tool, a metabolic reset button that recalibrates the body's internal systems and restores flexibility without abandoning the benefits of fasting or low-carb nutrition. When protein is consumed strategically, it has a profound effect on several key hormones that control metabolism. One of the most important is insulin. While many people fear insulin spikes during keto or fasting, the truth is that controlled, short-lived increases in insulin triggered by protein are not harmful. They are necessary. Insulin acts as an anabolic signal, allowing amino acids to enter muscle cells and promoting tissue repair. Without this signal, the body struggles to maintain lean mass and metabolism begins to slow. The protein trick leverages this natural response using timed protein intake to stimulate insulin just enough to rebuild tissue without promoting fat storage. This balance allows the body to stay metabolically active while preserving the fat-burning advantages of low-carb or fasting states. Another critical factor is the effect of protein on the muscle-building pathway known as mTOR, mechanistic target of rapamycin. In constant fasting or strict keto states, mTOR remains suppressed for long periods, which supports autophagy, the body's internal recycling process, but prolonged suppression can also inhibit muscle repair and growth. By strategically introducing protein, particularly rich in leucine, the body receives a pulse of amino acids that activate mTOR and stimulate muscle protein synthesis. This periodic activation is essential to prevent muscle loss, which in turn keeps resting metabolic rate high. It's not about breaking fasting rules, it's about breaking metabolic stagnation. The timing of protein intake plays a key role in this approach. After a prolonged fast or extended keto period, introducing protein at the right moment, such as post-exercise or during a refeed window, helps the body transition from a catabolic breakdown state to an anabolic rebuilding one. This shift restores hormonal balance, boosts thyroid function, and recalibrates leptin and ghrelin, the hormones responsible for hunger and satiety. People often report an immediate improvement in energy, mood, and focus once this balance is restored because the body finally receives the signal that nourishment is available again. The beauty of this protein strategy lies in its simplicity and biological precision. It doesn't fight the body's natural adaptation, it works with it. Instead of more fasting or restriction, it introduces a precise rhythm of feeding that teaches the body to become responsive again. When protein is used intentionally and rhythmically, it transforms from a simple nutrient into a metabolic messenger, one that reignites progress, restores hormonal harmony, and brings the body back to a state of thriving rather than surviving. Metabolic health has often been framed as a game of restriction. Eat less, fast longer, cut carbs lower. But the truth is, long-term wellness and sustainable fat loss come not from deprivation, but from cooperation with the body's own biology. When people understand how their metabolism truly works, they begin to see that progress isn't about fighting against hunger or willpower, it's about aligning with the natural rhythms that keep the body in balance. The frustration so many experience with keto or fasting isn't a sign that their body is broken. It's a sign that it's protecting them. The body's main priority is survival, not aesthetic change. When it senses scarcity for too long, it adapts by slowing metabolism, conserving energy, and holding on to fat as a safeguard. This is not failure, it's intelligence. And the only way forward is not to punish the body further, but to restore trust through nourishment and metabolic balance. When the focus shifts from restriction to restoration, the entire approach to health transforms. Instead of thinking in terms of what can I cut, the question becomes, what does my body need to feel safe enough to burn again? The answer often lies in reintroducing balance, adequate protein, nutrient density, and periods of recovery. True metabolic healing means giving the body the raw materials it needs to perform its most vital functions efficiently. When the body receives the right signals, regular nourishment, sufficient amino acids, and hormonal stability, it begins to burn energy more freely. Energy becomes consistent, cravings diminish, and the brain no longer interprets hunger as a crisis. This is the moment when fat loss stops being a battle and starts being a byproduct of balance. This mindset shift changes how people approach every aspect of nutrition and fasting. Instead of using these tools as rigid rules, they become flexible strategies that can be cycled, adjusted, and personalized. Metabolic health thrives on variation. The body needs to be challenged at times and comforted at others. Periods of fasting can coexist with days of refeeding. Low-carb phases can be followed by strategic carbohydrate intake to restore glycogen and thyroid function. This ebb and flow creates a metabolic rhythm that keeps the body responsive rather than resistant. When the metabolism feels supported, it adapts in a positive way, enhancing energy, supporting hormonal function, and improving longevity. Empowerment comes from understanding this rhythm. The goal is not to chase extremes, but to cultivate metabolic intelligence, the ability to know when to push and when to restore. Keto and fasting can be powerful tools when used in cycles, not as permanent states. When combined with the strategic use of protein and nourishment, they stop being forms of restriction and instead become mechanisms of renewal. Working with your biology means listening to it, responding to it, and trusting its feedback. The path to true metabolic health is not about doing more or eating less. It's about creating an internal environment where the body feels supported enough to thrive on its own.